All right, Neeks. So imagine this. You have $0, zero connections, zero experience. But you have one thing, a crazy idea. So now most people, they sit on their ideas, right? They kind of overthink, they second guess, they plan for years. But there's this one guy who sent one email, just one email, and that email turned into a $1 million business in 24 months. No investors, no fancy website, no tech, just one idea, a laptop, and an inbox. And so today, I'm going to tell you exactly how he did it.
Let's hear it. Sounds good.
All right. So, have you heard of Noah Kagan?
No.
Okay, so super smart, scrappy, insanely ambitious, and in 2005 he landed his dream job. Actually, before I tell you the job or the dream job, what's your dream job? Have you ever thought about that? Like, what's the dream job for you?
The dream job for me, it's interesting because I feel like I'm culminating into some sorts of it right now, but I either wanted to be a film director or a pure media artist like at MoMA.
Yeah, you've always been, for as long as I've known you, you've been in the MOA universe. So this guy, Noah, was employee number 30 at this company called Facebook. So this was well before it was $1 trillion empire. So this guy, 24 years old, he thought he made it. Who could blame him, right? He had, I mean, imagine you had stock options. That alone was probably worth in the millions. So his future was locked in until it wasn't. So one day, out of nowhere, boom, fired. So I looked into the backstory, the story behind the story, and there are a few reasons that he got fired, namely leaking corporate information, and then there was some misalignment issues with leadership. Anyway, so his story is actually this classic reminder that, you know what, just because you're smart, you still have to play with the team because everyone's replaceable no matter how good you are. So anyway, they basically just kicked him out one day, called him in, said, look, you know what? This is not working and you have to leave today. Now, here's where the story takes a really interesting turn. Most people in that situation, they kind of crawl into a hole, right? Maybe you go back to school, maybe, you try to get another tech job, but this guy, no, that's not what he did. He wasn't done. This guy's self-belief was next level. So he made a decision that he was going to start a business. And there was just one tiny problem. What's the problem most entrepreneurs face in this situation? They want to start a business. What's the problem? Think back to when you were an entrepreneur.
Getting started?
Yeah, getting started. There was just no idea, right? He had no clue
Yeah.
what kind of business he wanted to start, right? I mean, you've been there where, you want to start something, you want to, jump into entrepreneurship, you want to start a business, but you have no clue where to start, right? So fast forward 2010. This guy at this point, he's broke. So got fired from Facebook and he's literally just scraping by. And so one day he's scrolling online and he notices something weird. He said, you know what? People love custom t-shirts. But he figured out that ordering them was an absolute nightmare, right? Because you had to place bulk orders, there were ugly designs, clunky websites. So he asked himself, what if I made it easier? But here's where he did something different, right? So instead of wasting months writing a business plan, coding a website, or raising money, he asked himself, you know what? What if I just fire off one email? Just fired off one email. And in the email, the subject line was, want a custom t-shirt? That's it. Just want a custom t-shirt. No website, no suppliers, no inventory. Guess what happens? I wouldn't be telling you the story if someone didn't buy. So he got a response saying, yeah, I want a custom t-shirt. So now he's got this real problem, right? He actually now has to make the t-shirts. So he keeps things really simple. I mean, really, really simple. So he Googles the word t-shirt suppliers and then he finds one. He basically sends them an email and says, I have a customer who needs shirts. Can you print them? And so they respond saying, yes. And just like that, $200 order, then $1,000 order, then hundreds of orders from just one cold email. Guess what, bro? That little t-shirt hustle. So it's this company he built. It's called AppSumo. Now the company today does revenues of $80 million a year. Have you heard of AppSumo?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So,
I've seen their
so no
content.
one's,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So the wildest part about this is that, you know what? It just started with one email. That's it. Just one email. Just got started immediately.
The reason why I love that story is because we live in a world now where you don't have an excuse to get started because you have AI, right?
Yeah.
And even if you don't have an idea, like you just prompt your way to an idea, brainstorm and give me 10 new ideas for a new company based on my interests. Here are my interests, right? So you could literally prompt your way into that. And so this gives me pause when I think about AI leadership, especially in this new world where we're trying to constantly accelerate the rate at which we innovate. So this is maybe the human side of AI, right? Because now we're trying to optimize, we're trying to drive performance and things like that. But there's always this human factor for generating ideas. And so it got me thinking about, when I first started leading AI teams, I had this fundamental misconception that success would essentially be driven by technical excellence, right? And so having the most advanced algorithms, are you a Stanford PhD, the biggest data sets, the most compute power, that
Yeah.
would really just like crush these roles, right? But I was actually completely wrong. And I misunderstood that this nearly cost us a year of work and millions of dollars in investment. So our first major product, when we built this, considering a revolutionary recommendation system at Rocket Fuel, right? It was using cutting edge deep learning techniques, logistic regression, and all like the bleeding edge stuff. And the technical specs were pretty impressive, like state of the art accuracy metrics, like super blazing fast inference times and scaling capabilities. They could literally handle millions of users. But, our engineering team was super, super proud. I was proud. And then we released it and like nobody cared. Usage was abysmal.
Great kids.
Customer, yeah. So, customer feedback ranged from, they were confused to outright frustrated, and
Okay,
we
not
just couldn't
exactly
understand.
crickets.
Not exactly crickets, but they were just like, what is this? And they couldn't understand what had gone wrong with our perfect system. And we couldn't understand either because we thought we just had it so dialed in. And so it took a humbling series of user interviews to really uncover the truth. And so we'd been so focused on technical performance that we'd never deeply understood the actual problem that needed to be solved, right? So tying back to ideas, start with a problem, right? That needs to be solved. So our system was answering questions that nobody was asking. And the failure fundamentally changed my approach to AI development as a whole. So we then implemented what we call a human first AI development strategy, where the technical work doesn't begin until we have profound clarity on the human problem that we're trying to solve, right? So a design constraint that says, all right, think about the human here. So before writing a single line of code, we engage in a comprehensive process to understand the people who use our technology. We conduct extensive interviews. We shadow potential users in their natural environments. We prototype the crap out of it using simple tools, right? Before making it look cool and sexy and before committing to complex AI systems. And now you could render an out of the box demo solution very quickly with all the AI engineering tools like Replit and Cursor and Lovable, right? So you can get to an MVP within 48 hours, right? And so for this, let me give you a more concrete example. For our next product, instead of starting with model architecture discussions or big data transformation engines, we spent 3 weeks following customer service reps, understanding their workflows, pain points, what success meant to them. And we essentially discovered that what they needed wasn't the most accurate prediction system. They needed something that integrated seamlessly into their existing workflow and basically augmented their decision making at very, very specific high stress moments, right? It's removing that friction point. And this human centered approach just basically led us to build a much simpler technical solution, but one that delivered 10 times the value because it solved real problems that mattered to people. So now the lesson here, and it's probably one of the most valuable lessons I've learned in leading AI teams, is that AI isn't just about making machines smarter. It's about making people's lives better. It's about augmenting your current workflow, expanding the aperture for how you could look at things, delivering great insights. And you really just can't do that unless you deeply understand the lives, the context in which those people operate first, right? So technical excellence still matters, but only in service of those human needs. Now, whenever you need some big idea, whenever someone on the team presents a technical approach, the first question is, how accurate is this? And what are we optimizing to? What's the optimization function? And how specifically does this help the people that we're serving?
Mm. So you built a Ferrari and forgot to put the steering wheel in it.
Yeah, forgot to put the steering wheel in it. We were driving around in the parking lot. We loved Ferraris, and so we
Yeah,
were like, let's
but
throw a bunch
yeah,
of stuff at it. Yeah.
but if you could go back now and restart with zero budget,
hmm
for someone who's listening to this, zero budget, you're basically, at the start line, zero budget. What's the one thing you would do differently?
Well, the one thing you would do differently is you start with a very specific problem, like we had mentioned, and you're talking to people, you address that problem, but then you test it very, very quickly. So
Okay.
deploy a whole lot faster. No bells and
So,
whistles.
so,
It's literally like the framework of the car, right? The
so to
chassis
talk,
involved.
so how would you, because I get asked this question all the time. Well, how do I know? So do you just talk to as many people as possible to try to
Yeah,
understand, or you look at the classic, what kind of problems am I facing right now? Where's the friction in my life or
that's right.
okay.
That's
All
right.
right.
And so movement creates the information. And so now we're back to, the things that we've spoken about multiple times is, how do you get to PMF as quickly as possible? How do you deploy as quickly as possible so that when you're pontificating on potentially solving the problem, you're not just talking about a deck, you're actually like getting a mock-up of this with some early trusted customers, some friendlies, right? They test it, you bang around some ideas, you refine it, and then only in the wild you get into the wild basically like a whole lot faster.
Yeah. Noah talks about this. So he's got this book called The $1 Million Weekend Mindset.
Nice.
And he talks about exactly that. It's like, instead of pontificating and overthinking the business, right? He basically, because most people tell themselves, I need the perfect idea, I need funding, I need to learn more. Like that's the classic, trap that I fall into. And he calls all of that mental masturbation. Because
Yeah.
he says the
Yeah, I'm
reality is,
familiar.
dude, you just
Yeah.
need to start, right? So in his book,
Mhm.
he actually gives this ridiculously simple plan to start a business in 48 hours. He says
Yeah.
there are 3 steps. The first
Mhm.
step is you call 5 potential customers that you have, right? So now you've got this
Mhm.
idea, you call 5 potential customers. Your mom, your dad, your sister, your cousins, like we all know at least 5 people, right? And you pitch your
Yeah.
idea. And then you ask them, step number 2 is you ask them to pay you.
Yeah.
And once you ask them to pay you, step number
Yeah.
3 is to get at least
Yeah.
one, right? You just
Right.
get
Yeah.
one
Just
person.
one. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Congratulations, you now have a
Yeah.
business, right?
That's
That's
right.
it. There's no fancy logos, no business cards, no website, just asking people to buy what you're
That's
selling,
right.
right?
That's right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I think it's just such a powerful 3 step process uh, to just even test. Maybe everyone says no, right? Then
Mhm.
you've got something to work on because
Yeah.
these are people who are really close to you, right? And
Mhm.
if anything, you'll get feedback from step
Yeah.
2.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that response.
Uh,
That's so true.
and he also talks about what really like the biggest challenge that, or one of the challenges that people struggle with is, so he's
Mhm.
got this thing. He says, no ask, no get. So most people, they suck at it, right? They
Yeah.
suck at asking. They're afraid of rejection, right? So
Mhm.
they don't even try. So he basically has this. Have you heard of the Starbucks discount challenge?
No.
Stupidly simple. So he does this thing where he walks up to a barista, right? And he orders his coffee, and then he basically braces himself, and then he basically asks for a 10% discount. That's it. No reason. There's no excuse. He's just asking. Now, you might be thinking, well, what's the point, right? The point is that, most people would rather die than face a tiny bit of rejection. When I read that, I was just blown away, because that fear, that's what's keeping them stuck, right? So think about it. I mean, if you can ask for a 50-cent discount off of your latte macchiato, whatever it is that you order, right? Um, if you can't do that, how are you going to how are you going to ask for a raise? How are you going to
Yeah.
close a sale or pitch an
Yeah.
investor, right? You're
Yeah.
just not going to be able to. So
Yeah. That's
can I get a
I
free
mean,
upgrade? Or
yeah, you have to
can I
ask.
get a discount? Like, I
Don't
remember
ask, don't get, right? Is
yeah,
the lesson.
don't ask, don't
Mhm.
get. It's funny.
Yeah.
So I told my kids, one of them,
Mhm.
I said, asked for a discount. And one of them said, no, I can't. How can I ask for a discount? And the other one was like, yeah, absolutely. I'll ask for the discount. So, everyone's really different, right? And based on the
Yeah.
personality, I can tell who's going to be open to it and who isn't. Um,
Mhm.
just because of the rejection. Like,
No, for sure. And that's what creates, again, information is that you don't know. You just have to get out there. And sometimes you
yeah.
have to just get past your limiting beliefs. And usually the mind is super fickle, right? You'll make up stories to prevent you from doing the hard thing when the hard thing is exactly what you need to be doing first. So it's a very psychological thing, but
Mm,
that transitions nicely into just a very short anecdote on when to ignore data and when to use data. So first of all, the first lesson that I heard you say, and connects very nicely into one of my big insights, is that movement creates information, but then you also need to know as a leadership team or a founding team when to ignore the data, right? So AI leaders, they love to say, let's let the data decide, let's let the predictive models decide, what do the analytics say, right? But I've learned that sometimes the most valuable or important decision is knowing when to ignore the data completely, right? So there was this one client, and we were building a full stack AI application for them. And we were working on an AI assistant. This was in healthcare specifically. So lots of rigors and regulations and policies and HIPAA compliance and things like that. And our algos were basically suggesting different analytics that would maximize and optimize toward efficiency. So performance, removing friction, scheduling more patients in less time. This was for a hospital system. And so the data clearly showed that this would increase revenue, right, for whatever medical practice. And when we shadowed doctors, though, we saw that something in the data was actually missing. So those inefficient moments where a doctor was basically sitting quietly with a patient, holding their hand while delivering difficult news, those weren't inefficiencies. This actually goes back to the human side of AI, right? There's no way to capture that.
mm, mm,
This is at the
mm,
heart of healthcare.
mm,
If we just followed the data, we would have optimized away the humanity in
mm,
medicine. So the experience taught me that the data can tell you what is happening, but rarely why it matters. So the best AI leaders essentially know when to let the data lead and when there's definitely going to be some X or Y factor that you should be paying attention to, and never just look at the subset of information that you have. Because trust me, those critical moments, the final hours of somebody and when to make a very critical
mm.
medical decision, those times of comfort in which the doctors really truly care about their patients cannot be ignored. There's got to be a better way to capture that in data, but that is the human heart that goes right to the center of our healthcare industry as a whole.
Mm. Okay, so the data was missing something. I hear you. what else are we blindly optimizing for that we shouldn't be?
It's always going to be some kind of performance factor that relates to more users, more engagement, more adoption, more clicks, more time with technology, somehow tied directly to your P&L, right? And
Mm,
it's often the times that we don't account for the human factor of why somebody wants to be part of your team, or why you culturally have an affinity for this particular company. And it's not just because we're blindly successful. And I really think of this at Rocket Fuel as well, during the times of that very, very crazy unicorn Pegasus run. And I just really love the people, right? And so nobody measures this unless you're doing like a deep dive research survey and psychological profile, unless you had, some kind of doctor or like a guru or a Sherpa that's hired, even though we had like yoga classes and massages and things like that. So all of the company perks, but sometimes it's these X factors that you just can't measure, right? And so stakeholders, leaders will always place bets on driving performance, when really you should just look at the qualitative analysis more than the quantitative analysis.
mm. Yeah, I love what you said. If we just followed the data, we would have optimized away the
Away.
humanity in medicine. Wow,
That's
that's
right.
that's a mic drop line. So AI is great at following instructions, but I'm hearing you say that and I'm thinking, but who's making sure that the instructions aren't turning us into robots?
Hmm.
Like, how do we
Yeah.
know?
How do we know? Well, to
Yeah.
some degree, this gets into the philosophical, right? Because I think of Hegel, I think of Kierkegaard, I think of Kant, some aspects of Aristotle, and understanding the nature of reality. When we are constantly drawing a distinction between subject and object, we kind of get into trouble, right?
Yeah.
We're already symbiotes. We're already symbiotes with this machine that's constantly in our pockets, because we've constantly exported our cognition into our mobile phones. So to some degree, it's already happening. But for those of us that want to essentially maximize the emergence, the self growth, all of the things that we talk about on this show, it's simply having the awareness of what you're doing. You're engaging in what's called, Hegel calls this a dialectical process. And the dialectical process is basically me engaging with a system in which I'm having a conversation. We're doing a pod. I'm reading a book. I'm taking notes. I'm engaging in the creative process. In a way, this reveals the very nature of consciousness itself. And the reason for doing that is it exposes your awareness for a subject. So back to your point around, how do we know that we're not basically plugging back into the matrix? It's we're aware. So just our very awareness of the nature of this engagement gives us the autonomy. It gives us the sovereignty. It gives us the power to say, I don't need this device right now. I'm going to unplug. I'm just going to sketch and read a book and surf the waves. I don't need this right now. I am going to control my destiny by controlling my data, having the autonomy to say no, but then also understanding that, hey, you know what? My conversation with Claude Sonnet is just getting better and better. I don't feel like I'm just exporting my entire cognition or all of my decisions to Claude. I actually want to maintain my autonomy. And this means that you have to be a little bit more rigorous. Don't be lazy. Don't just, throw things into a prompt and say, I need this to respond to my email to my boss. And like, here we go, bang it out. You have to be vigilant. You have to be accurate. And I also feel like this is going to open up the doors for new job opportunities in the future. So people verifying data, making sure that they're accurate, making sure that there is some semblance or integrity of truth that goes with the data provenance. Where did this come from? But where am I getting this information from? Is it, two people that are voicing this concern that went viral, or is this 2 million people that share that same concern, right? So always thinking, always looking at yourself as having the autonomy to program yourself into controlling your world, controlling your destiny, and essentially having autonomy over our technology.
Hey there. We're taking a quick break from the show to let you know that if you'd like to invite Dhiren or Nikos to speak at your next event on topics ranging from emergence and the inner game to the future of AI, we've got you covered. Simply email us at info@emergencenowpod.com. Once again, that's info@emergencenowpod.com. Now, let's dive back to the show.
I hear you when you say we have to be rigorous and not lazy, right? I love that because it's so easy to fall into. It's a slippery slope, right? Because AI is just such a strong force multiplier, and it just scales whatever input you give it, right? But how do we not get it's so easy to get dependent, right? to to get lazy. I mean, I'm looking at not our generation, because I still know a lot of people in my circle who are not using ChatGPT on a daily basis,
Yeah.
while I know people who are spending more time on ChatGPT than they are on social media, for example. But I look at the next generation and I see that, they spend most of their time online. They're
Mhm.
online more than they are offline, not including sleep, for example,
Yeah.
especially on the weekends. I mean, that's just the reality. So, and I wouldn't say they're lazy, but they're definitely leveraging AI I mean, they're pushing the limits, and everything is going into to AI. How do you maintain that autonomy?
This one is super interesting because I've been very cognizant of my own behavior, and I'm in front of a computer or my phone now for 12 to 15 hours a day, right? And so I'm very much looking forward to the digital detox. And I'm also very
Hawaii
aware.
incoming.
Yeah, that's right. Here we go. Here we go. Surfing waves and reading books on the beach and getting fat a little bit, but also maintaining my health. So this one's super interesting because in being cognizant of my own technological consumption, I've always observed, what it's doing to me. Is it frying my brain? Do I feel tired or do I feel dialed in? Right. And for some reason, the combination of what's going on in the macro in terms of the landscape, because I'm right at the heart, right at the center of this stuff in AI, Silicon Valley, both in business and technology transformation. I'm also fundamentally growing my skill set based on the utilization of these tools. And so it's just been so much more interesting in terms of what it's been able to unlock for me. As a business executive, I can switch gears and now be a data scientist again. I can switch gears and be an AI researcher. Oh, guess what? I can be a filmmaker because I have Gen AI tools. And now I can go from Midjourney to using the Flux API, going from Flux and then going into Topaz AI, upscaling. And then there you go. Now I have a short film, a trailer that I showed you the other day. And now it feels like I'm in a video game that I just keep powering up, with some armor. Oh, check out, now I got a sword. Oh wow, now I have more weapons. So now I have this new arsenal. And so what you take away from this is, what's my feeling? Am I feeling like I'm getting better, or am I just feeling like I'm being inundated with, lots of information and I'm frozen and I'm not autonomous over my decisions. And so the discipline comes in just being more aware of your consumption of these tools, but then also just your general feeling of growth. Are you feeling like you're getting better, smarter, more empathetic? Or do you feel like you're kind of constantly at the behest of your device, feeling anxious, and you don't want to go talk to people, you don't want to engage in discussions, and you're feeling a little bit more recluse, or maybe you're feeling a little bit more narcissistic? So the option is now there for you to pay attention and to be more cognizant, but then also know, just, at the heart of these things, are you feeling good about yourself?
Yeah, that really resonates. And I think it's easier for some people like yourself who can go quite meta. You're aware that you're aware, and so, but the challenge, I mean, is for people who may not have that level of self awareness, and the dependency is starting to really ratchet up. But I do agree with you too. On some level, we're already cyborgs, right? I mean, the only question is who's in control. Because if you're inseparable, if you're spending 15 hours on your phone, I mean, you're already it's an extension of you, right? So the question is who's in control, right? I mean, you're dead on. Our phones are a part of us. There's no doubt. The real debate or the real question is whether we're merging with machines. It's not whether we're merging, but it's with the question is who's really driving that relationship. Like that's what keeps me up at night.
For sure.
Yeah.
This goes right to the very heart of what superintelligence and AGI could be, right? Are we talking about a collective consciousness that is simply a reflection of us or me, right? So you are in essence a reflection of me, just as I am a reflection of you. And as we're engaging with these tools, pay attention to, is it aware, or is it just parroting back to me in a very novel form or a more eloquent form, something that I already feel or represent, and have it challenge you, right? And so you'll fundamentally understand that it necessarily isn't about control. It's really about the self-reflective process as a form of creativity. And creativity, in essence, makes you more aware, right? So once you start doing the thing that we've talked about before, is start defining things as to it's this, it's not that, this is good, it's evil, this is right, this is wrong, I'm with the left, you're with the right, things like that are not necessarily unproductive, but being aware of both sides and having that dualistic perspective essentially binds us to what's next. And then really the emergence comes from having that awareness itself. So I agree with you. It gets controversial very, very quickly in terms of, what is the collective? And then you just have to surrender and just give up. And I don't mean give up in a sense that, hey, there's nothing we can do about it. It's the very nature of us questioning it. It becomes the very responsibility that we have as human beings to each other, to our families, to governance. And, what I hope to get out of this, and I'm a techno-optimist, admittedly, a techno-optimist that believes that if we are responsible and we intend to do good things, and good things will happen.
You heard it here first. Well said.
Yeah, I absolutely love everything that we're talking about, Dhiren. I think you read Noah's book recently where you kind of found a lot of these lessons. So, some key takeaways from the book that you feel our audience would really benefit from. Can you just dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So so one of the lessons is around, now, if you're an entrepreneur, this one's for you. So, Noah has this thing, he says, and this pisses off people who are the 9-to-5 lovers, right? The people who say, work-life balance, right? He says everyone should be an entrepreneur. Why? Because entrepreneurship is the best investment you can make in yourself. Because think about it. So he talks about stocks, 8% annual return, average, right? Real estate, 12% if you're lucky. Bonds, 5%. And that's if the economy is in a mess, as it is right now. A business, though, unlimited upside. So it's not about building a billion-dollar company. He talks about, look, it's not about that. You don't have to build a billion-dollar business. It's about controlling your time, your income, and more importantly, your options. So he calls it the freedom number. So for him, his freedom number, and I think we should actually do an episode on the freedom number. I think this is a really interesting concept that, I ask a lot of entrepreneurs, like, what's your time worth? Like, you're here for the next 8 hours. There's 7 of you in the room. What's your hourly rate, right? And people don't really like hourly rate. What do you mean? Like, they throw really small numbers to start with, but then they start thinking about it, and all of a sudden, boom! Like, your hourly rate is what kind of value can you create in 1 hour, right? And it gets really interesting. Anyway, so he talks about his freedom number being $3,000 a month. That's it. $3K a month meant that he could survive without needing a job. And once he hit that number, he had all the freedom in the world to just keep building what he was really passionate about. So I think it's a really interesting concept or question to think about. Like, what's the freedom number that allows you not to become a billionaire, but just to start thinking about maybe the next $1 million business?
There's something super interesting as just a perspective thought experiment around this, because it's not just what's your freedom number. It's also the freedom number in combination with just doing what you love. Because I feel like a lot of people would argue that I could take in a lot less if I was just grinding every day on what I love. And you can't lie to yourself about this, right? You could pull in 500K, 600K working as, an executive at a big tech company. And then, what happens? Like, it starts to dwindle away. And this is what I experienced myself in working for large tech companies, is that, when you become an entrepreneur, when you jump out of the plane without a parachute, you ask yourself, okay, what am I really building? And is it aligned with my own purpose? So it becomes much deeper than that. And you realize that, hey, I could be doing this every day. And honestly, I could be doing this for free because I love it. Obviously, you need to live and you need to survive. And everyone wants to be wealthy to have that financial freedom and all of those good things. But, the world will reward you for doing what you love. And you realize that you don't need a whole lot. I love this freedom number concept. It's really, really poignant. Thanks for sharing that.
And I think we definitely need to do an episode on the freedom number. But something you said about pulling in 500, 600K as a tech exec, you sit in boardrooms, maybe you're optimizing, your LinkedIn profile, but, eventually that's what happens, right? Things start to dwindle. And it's not because you're not making money. It's because, you're building the same thing that, you were building yesterday and day before that. And if you're not passionate about that, right, then it's not going to matter. Like, it will dwindle, right? You're not going to be as creative in finding ways to actually, extend that runway. So basically what he's asking when he says freedom number is, what's the number that's going to allow you to work on your thing, right? Because if you're not building something that matters to you, then are you really living life to its fullest and richest? So I love that as well.
Yeah, really great lessons here between. What an amazing time to be alive, right? So great lessons that you've shared with us, just in terms of Noah's journey and having big ideas, but then having the sense of resilience and also understanding when to invest in yourself. And just that note about the freedom number, we definitely have to dive into that. So yeah, I love this. I love this app and I love this conversation. So hopefully a lot more to come.
For sure. That's it for today's episode, guys. If you found this to be valuable, if this hit home, subscribe, leave a review. It helps more than you know. And if you want more stories of entrepreneurs who found their unlock, stay tuned. We'll see you in the next one. Ciao.
Thank you for tuning in to Emergence Now, where we explore the emerging trends, technologies, and ideas that are shaping our world today for you to discover yourself. We hope you enjoyed this episode and gained valuable insights that you can apply in your own life. If you want to stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on your favorite platform. And don't forget to follow us on social media, where we share additional content, engage with our community, and keep the conversation going. Thanks again for listening to Emergence Now, and we hope you'll join us for the next episode.